Okay, it's 7:01. Let's get this thing started. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We have a very special guest tonight, Sam Damon, Youth Development Coordinator, New Hampshire Alpine Racing Association. Got to see a presentation that he gave up at Lake Placid. I thought it was fantastic. He's going to be sharing some of that material. I believe every coach needs to hear. Let's not waste any time. Let's dive right into it. Sam, you want to take it away?
Let me share my screen here. All right, so thanks for having me here, everybody. Sean asked me to touch on a few topics about communication and how we deliver programming to our kids. This is sort of an abbreviated version of the talk that I gave last weekend in Lake Placid. We talked a little bit more about technical coaching and kind of how to get through some of that stuff with kids, but today we're going to focus on some other material. This is really about how we can use some things that we already know to improve our coaching. And I think that's kind of a good thing. There's actually not a whole lot of new information in here. It's things that you kind of already know. And so my hope is to give you a little bit of like actionable inspiration for how you can use it maybe better than we currently use it. My goal with these kind of talks is always to give you concrete tools that you can use right away in your coaching. So I hope that we'll have that happen and you'll come away with this with some things, like I said, that you can put into practice right away. Um, so yeah, let's dive right in. So we're going to talk a lot about communication and athlete, what their mindset is. So a couple of foundational pieces that I want to just dive into here. Um, so for every decision that we make, when we look at our programs, we look at how they're structured, the way that we're moving around the mountain, the content choices that we make, we always have to kind of ask ourselves this question: is it about development or is it about control? Um, we make a lot of decisions every day, whether we know we're making a decision or not. And ideally, we're always making those decisions with development in mind. And sometimes, of course, like you need a little bit of control. Like you might need the kids to listen if you're giving a brief instruction. Um, but I think when you look at this dynamic, you'll see this is kind of everywhere, all around you, and you'll notice, I think, a lot that there's a lot of things and a lot of people who are more about control than they really are about development. Ideally, we're going to use this kind of framework to correct ourselves in our programming to kind of get more into that development quadrant where we want to be. Um, we talk about the word development a lot, and it's always kind of an abstract concept. So just have the definition of it in here: to evolve or unfold gradually, to expand by a process of growth. And that's really what development is. And so, we can just kind of keep that in mind as we go along when we talk about this word. That's what we really mean by that. Whereas control means to exercise restraining or directing influence over. Okay, so that's where we're kind of maybe trying to steer things exactly in a certain way, or we think we know the best path forward, so we're trying to get things to go that way, whether that's with our actions or our words. Um, so the next kind of fundamental foundational piece here is what I call the laws of motion. And law number one is that when they have their boots on, they are ready to move. All kids, whether they're 8 years old or 18 years old, when they put their boots on, they're ready to move. Every buckle that gets buckled is flipping one more mental switch away from kind of the regular world where they might be sitting like in a car or at a table, and it's preparing them mentally to kind of turn over into the world of, downhill skiing, which is obviously movement based. Um, Once their skis are on, their minds have completely switched over to being in motion. And so we kind of have to keep that in mind. Um, this is really true for all kids, all athletes, I would say, who are ski racers. I think the older kids are a little bit better at kind of like disguising it, and sort of like pretending like they're paying attention, but in reality, their minds, their conscious and subconscious minds are very much in motion, and their bodies too. So once your skis are on, every time you're standing still, you're actually actively fighting against movement, whether it's pushing back with your poles or your body or your edges or all the various ways you can control it. You're actively controlling it, and as soon as you stop actively control it, you roll that ski back to flat, you pull those poles up, you pivot your skis just a little bit, you're back in motion again. And so the kind of summary point of all of these laws, the third and final law, is that there should be no standing around. Um, and yeah, I think uh, basically if their bodies are still, their minds have a limited range to where, if their bodies are still, their minds also become still very quickly, right? So we have a very, very narrow window. If you need to capture their attention, that window is quite small. The third fundamental thing, again, nothing totally new here. I think this is probably something that we all have felt about ourselves or about other coaches that we've worked with or observed, which is just that we talk too much. And that's always kind of our goal, is to be more efficient with our words and with our communication. One thing that I see all the time with coaches that I work with, I do a lot of coaches ed and coach certification, that kind of thing. And I would say that one thing I highlight the most is our desire to teach the kids often leads us to try to pass on everything that we know about a topic or about the sport to them kind of all at once. And we sort of have this vision subconsciously, I think, but this idea that we can sort of like open up their minds with a hatch and sort of pour all of our knowledge in, and then we can close the hatch and then they'll have it. It's there for them. They know it. It's in their head. They can retrieve it if they need to. And that's not really true. It doesn't really work that way. When we tell them things, when we do that, it's passive for them. It's active for us because as we're speaking, we are making connections and using our knowledge and our observations. So for us, it's an active process, and we are actually getting better at something when we do that. But for the kids, it's a passive process. They're just listening and kind of like taking it on. And so for them, it kind of just adds weight inside the mind, and it doesn't really accumulate into knowledge. And so that would be kind of the definition of control, right? Where it's like we're directing them and telling them what they need to know in words that make sense to us, but that really often don't make sense to them. Whereas if we're able to ask more questions of them, then we ask and then they tell, right? Then they're using their experience and their observations and their, sensations that they feel when they ski. Um, and that process of making those connections is retrieval practice for them, which is something that we should always be looking for, to reach back in your mind and use the things that you know to make connections. And so that's actually growing new connections and making them smarter and better. That's cultivating knowledge. And so that's really kind of the development piece that we're looking for, right? Is to unfold gradually, right? To expand by a process of growth. And so that's how we can really provide them that kind of growth. Giving them the answers doesn't really work. And that's not really in the development quadrant, even though everybody, all of us have a lot of knowledge that we can share with them, whether you have a ton of coaching experience or not. Um, so we want to try to be very efficient with our words and ideally find ways to engage them in retrieval where they have to think and come back to you and let them kind of do that talking. If you ask good questions, they can do that. So those are kind of the three foundational pieces that we're going to base this off of. Like I said before, normally I have a thing in here about technical coaching and how we deliver our technical cues to the kids, but we're going to keep this on time, and I'm just going to jump past that and dive into something that's probably even a little bit more practical, which is inspection. Um, so uh, when we look at, here's two pictures of a couple of, pretty classic youth racing inspection scenes. Um, I would say that a lot of my presentation here right now is focused on kind of like younger kids, like 12s and 14s in particular, but it's very true. If you're inspecting with a group, anything here it doesn't matter the age, it's all kind of universal. If you have older kids who are maybe inspecting on their own and you're doing course reports, this information is definitely relevant to that. You can't see them, but mentally they're in the same place as the kids we see here. So, again, is this development or is this control where we have the kids in a group? We're controlling where they stand, we're controlling what they're looking at, we're controlling what they're seeing. Um, and we're trying to control what they're thinking because in this process, we are telling them everything that we see about the course. And you can look at their posture. So just examine kind of the postures that you see. You can look at where their gaze is, where their eyes are pointing, and you can kind of get a sense for whether you think this is something that they're really engaged in, whether they're retrieving information right now, making connections, or is their mind, somewhere else. And this is not a shot at any. There are some coaches who are pictured in these photos. You may know them. I don't know. They're all friends of mine personally, and so this is just a universal thing, right? We all do this. We all see this. But it's kind of funny that we do it because I think intuitively we know that it doesn't really work that well. So if we take a look at this picture, again, here's sort of another classic scene here. Um, and we'll just take a quick inventory of sort of like the things that are happening in this picture. So that the green circle there is kind of the lead coach here. And he's pointing down towards that gate that you can just kind of see on the side of the frame. And that's kind of the piece of the track that they're looking at. If we kind of go on with the inventory here, we've got this guy up here is actually not part of this group. So this is a group of, I don't know, 15 or 20 kids maybe. And there's a whole other gigantic group right behind them, and they have to wait for this group to get out of the way because they can't actually see what's happening on the track. So he doesn't count. But yeah, if we move forward, we've got one kid up top there. He's pretty locked in. He's paying attention. We've got another kid there. This little guy is standing really close to coach. He's looking right at the gate or at the coach. Kind of hard to tell, but he seems pretty engaged overall. This kid is, standing next to the coach and looking down the track, kind of threading the gaze through a few people. And then you got this guy who's obviously making some effort to see the gate and is standing, one person away from the coach, so can probably hear and maybe can just barely see. Again, kind of threading that gap. Um, yeah, so if we look at what else is going on, sorry, my browser just went a little wonky. Um, We've got this guy in there. He's tucked way down in there, really little guy. You can barely see him. But he is not looking where he can't he can't hear, he can't see. Really not sure what's going on there. We've got Coach who's kind of looking down at his skis, thinking about something else. This guy can maybe hear. He's 4 or 5 people away from the coach and pretty small, so he's kind of buried in the group, but he definitely cannot see, and he's sort of staring off in the distance. I got this guy up there. He's not attached to the group and definitely can't hear and is not looking. This guy's looking down at the other guy's skis. This guy's looking at his own skis as well. We got this guy looking off in the woods. We got that person kind of just staring off into the group, wondering what's going on. This guy's looking down at his skis. This kid's looking off in the woods. This guy's looking down, probably can hear, but probably not putting a lot together because he can't actually see the gate that they're supposed to be looking at. It's worth noting here the coach's vantage point in this situation is really different than the kids. The coach can see over all their heads. And next time you're in a group doing something like this, uh, I would encourage you to just squat down a little bit and put your head where their heads are, and you'll be, I think, very shocked at how little you can see. Anyways, we got this guy. He's listening, but pretty zoned out. This coach is just 1,000 yard stare, waiting for kind of this to be over. This kid is, waiting for these guys to move. Maybe he's going to catch a glimpse as we're on our way out. This girl has tried to listen, but she's kind of given up hope of being able to kind of really figure out what's going on. She can't see up the hill at all, so the context for the gate below them doesn't really make sense because she can't see at all the whole picture. So I have the sense that she's kind of just thrown in the towel. And then we've got this guy kind of looking down at his skis a little bit. And then this guy is my favorite guy for sure. He's just staring kind of up into the trees. I really would love to know what this dude is looking at. He's spotted a bird of prey or something up there. I love that one. Um, so yeah, clearly a lot of red here, right? A lot of kids not engaged. The race winner of the day for both the boys and the girls was in this group. But I don't think that they got a lot out of their inspection. As I track this kind of, classic scene again, this is very common. It's not to single anybody out. Quick inventory of the coaches. We've got a coach there, coach right there, another coach there, another coach there, kind of right next to the lead guy. And then we've got this one other coach up top. up there. So we've got one, two, three, four, five, six coaches in this group and a whole bunch of kids, and they were kind of all just mobbed together. Um, and I think, my takeaway from this is like that this is just a very, very ineffective way to do this. This is completely top down. It's well intentioned, right? We're trying to get them to the development quadrant by telling them what we know. But by doing it in that way, we have no ability to check on what they know, right? So if we look at like who owns this environment, I mean, it's definitely the coaches. We want the kids to take responsibility for their racing and their knowledge and their outcomes. But we very often, again, with the best intentions, kind of take that opportunity away from them. And inspection is a place where we really, really do that a lot. Um, the coaches own this environment. The kids are doing what they're told. The kids are completely at the will of the coach. They stop where the coaches tell them to stop. They have to stand and pay attention. They have to face, a certain way. Um, all that. So the other piece of this is again, like we're trying to fill their heads with the right knowledge, but it's really, really difficult to tell what they're getting out of it. And in this setting, it's impossible for you to connect with one of the kids, right? If you're one of these other coaches with the yellow circle and you kind of like lean over and say, "Hey, what do you think about this skate?" Well, now you're talking while the other coach is talking, and that's kind of disruptive and that's going to break everybody's focus even more. So we don't really know what their takeaways are from this. Um, we don't really have a way to verify, and it's really impossible to like ask a question of a kid and get them to kind of make those connections and do that talking. So for that kind of like talk too much piece, this is huge. Not to mention, like I said before, just the functional piece of like what they can see, right? Where they can't, it's basically impossible in this setting. There's really only one or two vantage points where you can see up the hill and down the hill, which you need to know what this turn shape should be, because the turn is defined by what's above it and what's below it. But none of these kids can see both of those things if they can see either one of those things. Um, so yeah, like I said, this is all stuff that I think we can probably relate to. It's rare to get down inspection with this methodology. We get down to the bottom, and I would say that we pretty much never feel like it went all that well. It's like we don't really. I think if we polled everybody, they'd say they got down, and it's like, well, this kid wasn't paying attention, that guy wasn't paying attention. And even if they were paying attention, it's a lot of information for them to like just take in, right? For us to just pile on, for them to use in that layered way. It's just not a very functional thing. And I think that we know that intuitively. Like I said, this is not a satisfying process. Even as a coach, it doesn't feel like we're at our best. Um, and so I'd say that, we sort of intuitively know that this doesn't work. The question is like, why do we still do it? And I think that's, again, partly why I'm hoping to help you all use this knowledge that you have to say like, well, there's a better way. We can do this a little bit better way. So let's take a look at some of that and how we do it. So the first thing here is just to know that like the coaches are optional here. Okay. Um, how I would approach this when how I do approach it when I'm working with groups of kids, with a big group of kids, like if you've got 15 or 20 kids in your ski group and you've got to get them all through inspection, okay, my suggestion would be to tell them, inspection starts at noon and I'll be up there at noon. And if you want to inspect with a coach, I'll be there at noon and we can inspect together. And you're going to have a few kids show up because you've got kids in your group who are not feeling confident enough, or it's their first race, or it's their first year, and they just don't really understand what they're supposed to be doing anyways. You'll have a few of those kids show up, and it's actually much more gratifying for everybody to inspect in a group of like three kids or four. It's kind of gets difficult over four, but um, you can actually check to see what they think or what they know or what they see in a group that size. And you can actually sort of teach them the way of like what makes a good inspection, right? You can give them some suggestions for some things they should be looking for and then ask them, did you see any of those things? But yeah, so if you give them this option to inspect with a coach, you'll have a few who show up because they're too nervous not to. You'll have a few who show up because their parents say that they have to. And then you'll have some kids who show up they might see you at the top and then they're just going to skate. They're just going to try to slide by and sneak away and go inspect on their own. And they're going to whiz through the course and probably not get anything out of it. But to be honest with you, they probably weren't going to get anything out of it anyways, because the kids who are doing that are the kids, the ones who are staring upwards into the trees while we're supposed to be looking at the track and seeing what's happening out there. Um, and then you're going to have some kids who are dying to get out of that group already because they are ready to inspect without a coach, and they feel it frustrating because they cannot see and they cannot kind of make sense of everything that's happening around them. They can't see above, they can't see below, and they're kind of just itching to get out of it. And when they do get out of it, even at a young age, even for like a U10, you have kids in there who are going to be able to make the most of that kind of like independence, that autonomy. Kids who will come to you with questions. Um, I would look at it that way. So as a functional matter, that's how I would approach it, is to say you can inspect with a coach if you want to. And you'll have a few at first, and then you'll have less and less as time goes on. So really it's all about, instead of saying, let's go, you directing them, let's go, you say, okay, guys, go ahead, right? And let them do the inspection. Um, Instead of saying, okay, come with me, we're gonna go, let's go. You can say, okay, why don't we head down to this spot? I'll meet you there. You guys inspect, and I'll meet you, at Coach's Knoll or at the breakover or at the top of the T-bar or whatever. I'll meet you there, and you can tell me what you've noticed so far. So you're front loading for them that they should be trying to take something in, and then you just go down. And then they'll come down and they'll tell you what they saw. And a lot of them won't have seen anything, because the fact is that on these courses, there's really rarely anything exceptional to see. Um, for myself, even coaching at a high level, I was the Team USA coach at the Youth Olympics in 2024. We didn't inspect every gate with the kids, right? We had multiple kids in the top 10 in slalom, GS, Super G downhill. Um, we look for the places where something could happen, where maybe there's an opportunity to make speed that they might not see, or there's like a really tight hairpin and it's on a roll and the snow changes right there, whatever, some trick that like, ooh, I'd like to make sure they see this one really tricky spot. And then you can stand there, and when they get there you say, hey, what do you notice here? Why do you think I'm standing here? What do you think is here that I'd like to highlight for you, that I'm really hoping you notice? And then see what they say, right? Um, and the truth is, like, a lot of times during inspections, we're reaching for things. So we're explaining things to them that don't need explanation. Like a rhythm section of 3 GS gates, like it doesn't need an explanation. They just need to look at it, know kind of like a little bit about it, roughly when and where in the course it is, and then they can move on. That we don't need to explain, these concepts about turn shape and, line or whatever, all that kind of stuff about them. Um, the thing that I do most often with kids is, like I said, if I'll inspect, and you can do it just barely right in front of them, if you've got it, depending on your team size, but you can kind of go down, and most of the time you won't really see anything. The kids will cue into what they think is important. A lot of young kids like to know the order of combinations. They go, down at the bottom of the slalom, you say, "What'd you see?" And they say, "Oh, it goes hairpin, hairpin, flush, flush, flush," or something like that. It's like, okay. There's a lot of other gates on the course, but that's what you've kind of like locked into. So very good. Um, my most common strategy is to post up above the finish line and just ask them, hey, are you all good? Or did you notice that gate, 5 gates above here? It's a little bit of a bogey here, right down near the finish. Do you see that? Yeah, okay, good. And then you let them go, and then you let them do their pre-race routine, whether that's visualization or whatever next thing they go into. So some other actionable steps here is basically just to kind of upgrade your routines. Okay. So inspection, obviously, we talked a lot about inspection just now. Another kind of couple things on race day is the running order. So if you have kids who run 90 or 100 or something like that, and we ask them to be up there when the race starts, we're kind of doing them a pretty big disservice. Like, those kids should be out skiing. We know that the minimum interval in GS is 30 seconds. So if you run 90, you have at least 45 minutes after the race starts until you go, and that assumes no delays, no issues. Um, So we shouldn't really be asking kids to hang out up there for 45 minutes. One of the key skills you have in ski racing is the ability to count. And so they have to be able to do a little bit of math. You can kind of tip them off when they should maybe jump on the lift to come up for their run. Um, Lineups at the top of the race course or in training, we should try to eliminate those. Again, anytime kids are standing in line, if you've got a line that's like, more than, I would say, 2 minutes at the top of your training course, you got to do something different. Figure out a way to get that down. And likewise, when we're lining kids up at the top of the race and they're 30 deep with their skis on, or they're 20 deep with their skis on, you're violating the laws of motion, and it's really, really hard on their bodies. It makes you really stiff to stand in your skis like that. It's not a good way to like be athletically, physically ready for anything at any age, even when they're pliable as a U10. Um, and it's not good for their mindset because it just doesn't allow them to move. It disconnects their mind from what they're doing. Again, they're ready for movement. And then again, with your technical coaching, Sean mentioned to me that he has a kind of 5 words or less rule. My rule is if you can't say it to them when they're going past on the lift, you've sort of already said too much. Or if you're side slipping by, you should be able to give them that quick piece of feedback. And again, it kind of just all comes back to this idea of, no standing around. We don't want them standing around. It disconnects their brain from their activity, from their body. So, yeah, a little exercise you can do here to kind of test this out if you want. You can have somebody record your words during inspection or during a course report, and then have that person write them down and read them back to you. Um, I say that, there's a disclaimer here. It's a bit of a trigger warning. If you have a difficult time, hearing the sound of your own voice, like on a recording or something, this is 10 times worse than that because all the things that you think you're saying, it's not exactly what you're saying. And it doesn't, when you hear your words back, you're like, what? That is not accurate. That's not what I said. I was way more clear, way more concise. I made a very cogent point about what they should be doing here or what the plan was. And when you hear your words read back, you realize just how kind of abstract your language really is, and how when you lose a little bit of context, you lose one little glimmer of how a gate looks or something like that, one tiny little piece of this, and the whole thing just like makes no sense. So I have a transcript that I recorded of a friend during a Super G inspection. I'm gonna not read that, but I recommend everybody does this. For me, this was one of the things that was the most transformative activities I've ever done. And I still try to do it every so often just to see what I sound like. Yeah, so some just the summary points, right, is to look at everything that we do, all the actions that we take, how we move our group, and ask ourselves, is this development or is this control? Our goal should always be to talk less for ourselves and ask more. I'm saying this as a person who has done nothing but talk to you now for 25 minutes. Um, but we should be trying to talk less and ask more. Let's get them to make those connections and let them do the talking. Let's let them do the inspection on their own and find out what they know. And then the kind of tying it all together point here is the less standing around they're doing, the better. When they're on skis, they're in motion. So we want to try to connect that physical motion to their brain as well. And that's what I have. So if you guys have any questions or anything, I'd be happy to answer them.
I'm going to jump right in there. We've got a couple questions, so I'll bring them up. And thank you, Sam. As you know, I already told you how great I thought this presentation was. At what age should we start asking if they want to inspect with a coach? I believe it's U10. I can go into why I think that is. Sam, I'm interested in what your thought is there.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would say right away. I mean, most kids are like we have U8s who are doing some racing. The typical U8 inspection is like just line them up and send it down there as a big snake. That's totally fine. Um, they're not really inspecting at that age. They don't have a lot of ability. They don't really have spatial awareness so much at that age. But I would say, yeah, right away. I mean, why not? Why not get them in the habit, right? Why not get them tied into that understanding that like this is their thing. So I would say right away. I think if you have a kid who's brand new to racing, I would say by their third race run, they should be ready to pretty much do this on their own. They should know kind of what they're there for. And then you can start asking them questions and they're going to start learning that way.
Thank you. That my perspective is that inspection is a skill, just like being in the front of the boot, edging the ski with your lower leg or foot, or planting a pole. And it has to be taught and it has to be learned. And so because of that, they need to start early with this. We need to do it in practice. I'm going to jump to the next one because this I actually brought up at the presentation at Lake Placid. Rufus Davis, same Sean, but will mention that a number of parents flipped out last year when I introduced this way of inspection. So Rufus is on board 100%. Parents get upset. And I brought this up. I said, our biggest challenge is the parents. So we ultimately, my answer to this to Rufus and everyone else is that we have to train them. And if we start at U10, we won't have a problem at U14, U16. The problem is we've created our own monster because they've seen this and they look up there and they see, well, look what everyone else is doing. Look what all the other teams and those coaches are out there and they're leading them down and they're getting all kinds of feedback. You and I know it's terrible. So we have to train them and let them know why we're doing what we're doing. This is the right way to inspect. Teach them about visualization. That's part of inspection, and help them get there. So Rufus, thank you. That's a good question, and we've got some work to do here.
Yeah, I would echo that completely. I think you have to just be, for me, parent relations are always kind of tricky. I would say just front load it with them, in your early season meetings with them, say, hey, we're going to be asking the kids to inspect on their own during training. And so that's how we're going to do it on the races. And the coaches will be there to kind of check in and support and find out what they know. But inspection is something that happens for them inside their own mind. And you cannot connect into all of their minds all at once in that group environment. It just doesn't work. So the kids they gotta start figuring out how to do it. They gotta learn.
So we have another question. How do you differentiate for kids who need more support? And I think he answered that with, you ask them, right? You say, I'll be there if you want to inspect with me. And that's where we start with those U10s. And then ultimately, as coaches, as a team, we need to post up. We have a big team, so we have enough coaches. Whenever we go to a race, we have plenty of staff there. So you post up in a couple spots, especially where they might be challenged, and then ask questions like Sam said. Sam, do you have anything else to add to that?
Yeah, like some of those kids who are looking for more support, who feel like they need more support. I wouldn't like question that whether they do or not, but I would just say that part of the thing we can give them as coaches is the ability to be independent, right? So when you have kids who are like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing and I need an adult and I just want to be near an adult, that's fine, but part of what we're giving them as like a life experience, life lesson is the ability to like be a self-agent, be autonomous. And so we just want to take that and use that as the first step of the process of helping them realize that, with the goal being of doing more of that in more facets of their life. And something like course inspection, I mean, it's simple, but it can be the first step, and I think, yeah, that's, again, to me, that's how I look at it. It's just one of the many like life lessons that they get out of this sport is being independent.
Well, thank you, Sam. We try to keep these to 30 minutes. People have busy lives. You have a busy schedule. So I can't thank you enough for coming on and sharing this with us. And I'd love to have you back again another day.
Yeah, no problem. Glad to be here. And as I said in Lake Placid, if the parents do give you a hard time, and you brought it up ahead of time and you said, hey, look, this is how we're doing inspection. It's going to look a little different at first, but your kids are going to get a lot more out of it this way. If the parents aren't on board, just have them call me and I'll straighten them out.
Thank you.
All right, thanks you guys. Appreciate you having me on, and yeah, look forward to seeing everybody out on the hill.
Thank you all for joining us. We'll catch you next time.